There was a little bit of bitterness when we presented the trophy there and shook their hands.
Team Europe made history at the 2025 Ryder Cup. They claimed a stunning 15-13 victory at Bethpage Black in New York. It was their first win on American soil in 13 years. Celebration should have been pure, but one of Europe's stars, Matt Fitzpatrick, fired back at PGA President Don Rea. He showed a level of bitterness that shocked everyone. This wasn't just talk during the heat of battle. Days later at a press conference, Fitzpatrick, a guy who usually stays quiet, let his grievances fly. This is how a winner somehow acted like a loser. He let bitterness taint what should have been his team's shining moment. Some people even called it a meltdown. Now, Fitzpatrick is not the type to jump into political drama. That's what made his outburst at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship so surprising. He could have just celebrated the win. Instead, he chose to complain. Fitzpatrick built a career on being a quiet professional, but with these comments, he may have destroyed that image. Do you think a player's words after a match can ruin their reputation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more stories they don't want you to hear. Let's talk about what set him off. Yes, the Bethpage Black crowd was terrible. They screamed obscenities at Rory McIlroy the moment his face hit the screen on Friday morning. They were called disgusting. Someone even threw a beer near his wife. But come on, this is the Ryder Cup in New York. It's not a tea party. A professional team, especially one that won, should be able to handle it. The hostility at Bethpage wasn't just random noise from drunk fans. This was targeted abuse, personal attacks, the kind that goes beyond supporting your team and crosses into something darker. Some observers even linked it to broader divisions in American culture. They said the behavior reflected something bigger happening in the country. The Ryder Cup, with its nationalistic structure, can easily become a battleground for these larger tensions. Passionate support can quickly turn into aggressive behavior that blurs the lines of what's acceptable, and this isn't the first time. Look back at the 1999 Ryder Cup at Brookline. That event was infamous for the hostile reception the European team received. They called it the Battle of Brookline. Colin Montgomery faced brutal verbal abuse back then, just like Rory McIlroy did in 2025. This suggests that the toxicity at Bethpage wasn't some weird one-time thing. It was an escalation of a pattern that keeps repeating at US-hosted Ryder Cups. When patriotism gets too intense, it can spill over into unsporting conduct. The PGA of America clearly failed to learn from history. Their decision to hire a comedian to whip up the crowd backfired spectacularly. That comedian ended up participating in vulgar chants. It shows the organization wanted the energy and marketing appeal of a modern, rowdy sporting event, but they had no strategy to manage when things got toxic. They wanted the atmosphere without the responsibility. Then PGA President Don Rea went on the BBC and made it worse. He compared the abuse to a youth soccer game. He wrongly claimed it's just as bad in Rome. This is what Fitzpatrick called pretty offensive. Rea even said he hadn't heard some of that, proving he was totally out of touch. He had no idea what was really happening on his own course. But here's the thing. Don Rea is not a professional golfer. He's an administrator, a businessman running an organization. He doesn't walk the fairways during competition. So when he said he hadn't heard some of the abuse, was he really lying? Or was he simply being honest about his limited perspective from the administrative side of the event? Fitzpatrick seized on this comment as proof of incompetence. But think about it differently. Every major sporting event has unruly fans. Football games have fights in the stands. Basketball games have fans thrown out for crossing the line. This is not unique to golf or the Ryder Cup. It's a reality of passionate sports fandom in the 21st century. Professional athletes are paid millions to perform under pressure. Part of that pressure includes hostile environments. The European team knew what they were signing up for. They knew they were going to Bethpage Black, a notoriously tough New York crowd. They knew the history. They knew what happened at Brookline, and yet they still chose to make an issue of it after they won. If they had lost, you could understand the complaints. Losers often look for excuses, but winners usually take the high road. They usually say the crowd motivated them, that adversity made victory sweeter. Fitzpatrick could have said that. He could have praised his team for overcoming a hostile environment. Instead, he complained about it. Fitzpatrick later praised European fans for their creativity and playful banter. He said it was different from the random obscenities shouted at Bethpage. European fans create clever chants. American fans at this event just hurled personal insults. While some might say Fitzpatrick was being biased, the evidence backs him up. When you're throwing things at a player's family and security has to be increased, that's not banter anymore. That's abuse. But let's be real here. Is European fan behavior really that much better? Fitzpatrick wants us to believe that European crowds are civilized and creative, while American crowds are barbaric and crude. That's a convenient narrative when you're European and trying to claim moral superiority. But anyone who has attended sporting events in Europe knows that crowds there can be just as nasty. Soccer hooliganism is a European invention. Racist chants at football matches happen regularly regularly across Europe. Rea's comment about Rome wasn't completely off base. He suggested that hostile fan behavior happens on both sides. Fitzpatrick took great offense to this, calling it insulting to European fans. But was Rea really that wrong? Or was Fitzpatrick just unable to accept that his side isn't perfect either? The reality is that passionate nationalism at sporting events can bring out the worst in people, regardless of which continent they're from. Fitzpatrick's refusal to acknowledge this shows a lack of perspective and maturity. But here's where Fitzpatrick's bitterness truly showed. During the trophy presentation, Don Rea gave a very brief 10-word congratulation. His big mistake was congratulating Team Europe for having retained the Ryder Cup. Retaining is what you do in a 14-14 tie. Europe had won 15-13. This wasn't some polite oversight. Fitzpatrick and Justin Rose immediately looked at each other. They decided it wasn't heartfelt. But was this a deliberate insult, as Fitzpatrick claimed, or just a simple mistake from a man who doesn't play the sport? Instead of lifting the trophy and enjoying the moment, Fitzpatrick was counting the words in the speech and analyzing verbs. This is where the celebration died and the bitterness began. Think about what happened here. Rea is standing on a stage, probably reading from prepared remarks, in front of thousands of people and television cameras. He's nervous. He's not a public speaker by trade. He misspoke and used the wrong words. This happens to people all the time. The gracious thing would have been to accept the congratulations, assume good intent, and move on with the celebration. But Fitzpatrick couldn't do that. He chose to interpret it as a deliberate slight. He convinced himself and his teammate that this was an intentional insult designed to diminish their achievement. That's paranoia talking. That's someone looking for a reason to be offended. A true champion, secure in his victory, wouldn't care about one misused word in a trophy presentation. He would be too busy celebrating with his teammates and enjoying the moment. The fact that Fitzpatrick and Rose exchanged looks and immediately questioned the sincerity of the congratulations tells you everything you need to know about their mindset. They were primed to see disrespect. They went into that ceremony looking for problems. And when you're looking for problems, you'll find them even where they don't exist. Rea's first reaction to criticism was a LinkedIn post saying he was not bothered. That just made Fitzpatrick angrier. So days later, he held his press conference and publicly attacked the PGA president. He called Rea bitter. He called his comments offensive. This public attack worked. It forced Rea to issue a humiliating apology to all 30,000 PGA members, admitting the fan behavior crossed the line. But who really looked bitter? Fitzpatrick, the winner, couldn't let it go. He didn't handle it privately. He threw a public tantrum and risked overshadowing his entire team's achievement just to settle a score. Here's what should have happened. If Fitzpatrick genuinely felt disrespected by the PGA president's comments and the trophy presentation, he had options. He could have called Rea privately. He could have expressed his concerns directly. He could have given Rea a chance to explain himself or apologize in private. That's how professionals handle disputes. That's how adults resolve conflicts. Instead, Fitzpatrick chose the nuclear option. He went public. He held a press conference specifically to air his grievances to the media. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew it would create headlines. He knew it would force Rea into a corner. This was a calculated move designed to humiliate the PGA president and gain public sympathy for himself and his team. And it worked. The media picked up the story. Social media exploded with takes. People chose sides. Rea was forced to apologize. But at what cost? The story of the 2025 Ryder Cup changed. Instead of being remembered purely as a historic European victory, it became the Ryder Cup where the winners complained. It became the tournament defined by controversy and conflict rather than great golf. Fitzpatrick made himself the main character. His press conference drew more attention than his actual performance on the course. People will remember his complaints more than his contributions to the team victory. Is that really how a champion wants to be remembered? Is that the legacy he wanted to create? We can try to understand his mindset. Athletes can usually handle crowd noise, but an official slight feels different. It feels like a challenge to the legitimacy of the achievement. He was probably trying to defend his team bubble. He wanted to protect his team's honor. That us against the world mentality can be powerful. The Ryder Cup is unique because it transforms individual competitors into teammates. These golfers spend their entire careers playing alone. Then suddenly they're part of a team with intense bonds. This creates a powerful group dynamic. When someone from the outside appears to attack that group, the response can be fierce. Fitzpatrick's comments can be seen as an act of leadership. He was voicing what his whole team felt. He was reinforcing their shared reality and protecting their collective honor. Team Europe has often built success not just on individual talent, but on superior team chemistry and psychological preparation. The actions of Don Rea struck at the heart of this foundation. By questioning the legitimacy of their win and the character of their fans, he attacked the very identity of how Europe approaches the Ryder Cup. In that context, staying silent might have felt like acceptance, but there's a counter-argument here that deserves consideration. Did Fitzpatrick really speak for his entire team? Or did he take it upon himself to be their voice without asking? We didn't hear from other European players making the same complaints. We didn't see a unified front of golfers demanding an apology. It was primarily Fitzpatrick, with some support from Justin Rose, making noise about this issue. That raises an interesting question. Was this really about defending the team, or was it about Fitzpatrick's personal need for validation and respect? Was he genuinely offended on behalf of his teammates, or was he offended for himself and using the team as justification? validation. The evidence suggests the latter. If this was truly a team issue, you would expect to see multiple players speaking out. You would expect a coordinated response. Instead, you got one player going rogue days after the event at a tournament that had nothing to do with the Ryder Cup. That doesn't sound like team unity. That sounds like one person with an axe to grind who couldn't let it go. Fitzpatrick's claim that he was defending the team rings hollow when you examine his actions. Real team players elevate their teammates. They deflect attention away from themselves and toward the collective achievement. They make the moment about the group, not the individual. Fitzpatrick did the opposite. He made himself the center of attention. He created a controversy that overshadowed his teammates' performances. That's not leadership. That's selfishness. That's putting your own ego ahead of the team you claim to be defending. A true leader would have found a way to address the issues without turning the victory into a circus. A true leader would have protected his teammates from the distraction and drama. Instead, Fitzpatrick created the distraction and forced his teammates to deal with the fallout. But that same mentality can also make you paranoid. It can make you see insults where there are just mistakes. The Ryder Cup has a history of hostility. Think back to the 1999 Battle of Brookline. Rea's failure was not managing the crowd. Fitzpatrick's failure was stooping to that level. He complained about a lack of sportsmanship by showing none himself. He wanted to reclaim the story, but instead, he just wrote a new, ugly chapter. The comparison to Brookline is actually instructive here. That 1999 controversy involved American players celebrating on the green before their opponents had finished. It was a genuine breach of golf etiquette that happened in real time during the competition. It was an action that directly affected play. Even then, while it was controversial, both sides eventually moved past it. The European team didn't hold press conferences weeks later rehashing their grievances. Fitzpatrick's situation was different. The alleged slight happened after the competition was over. It involved words, not actions on the course. It was ambiguous at best and possibly completely unintentional, and yet he chose to elevate it to a major international incident. That shows poor judgment and a lack of proportionality in his response. Moreover, by continuing to fight this battle days later, Fitzpatrick revealed something about himself. He couldn't enjoy the victory. He couldn't be satisfied with winning. He needed everyone to acknowledge not just that Europe won, but that they won despite being victims of terrible treatment. He needed the narrative to include suffering and overcoming adversity and being disrespected by the hosts. The simple joy of victory wasn't enough. That's a troubling mindset for a professional athlete. The best competitors find motivation internally. They don't need external validation or sympathy. They don't need to be seen as victims to feel good about their achievements. Fitzpatrick apparently does. He apparently needs everyone to know that he and his team were wronged. He needs that victimhood narrative to make the victory feel complete. That's weakness, not strength. In the end, Don Rea looked foolish and was forced to apologize. But Matt Fitzpatrick's fireback will be remembered as a strange and bitter moment that stained a historic victory. He won the argument but lost the moral high ground. Rea's apology, while necessary from a public relations standpoint, actually vindicated Fitzpatrick in a way he didn't deserve. It gave legitimacy to his complaints. It made it seem like his outburst was justified and appropriate. But the reality is more complicated. Rea apologized because he had to, because the pressure became too great, because his organization needed to move past the controversy, not necessarily because Fitzpatrick was right to handle things the way he did. Fitzpatrick got what he wanted. He got his apology. He got his headlines. He got to position himself as a fighter standing up for his team. But what did it cost? He turned a professional triumph into a personal vendetta. He made the story about him instead of about European golf. He showed the world that even in victory, he couldn't be gracious. He couldn't take the high road. He had to fight, had to complain, had to make sure everyone knew he felt disrespected. Let's be clear, Matt Fitzpatrick is a phenomenal golfer and a Ryder Cup champion. His passion and skill are undeniable. His contributions to the European victory were significant. On the course, he performed when it mattered. His golf speaks for itself. But this incident shows how even the best can let bitterness get the better of them. It shows how the need for respect and validation can override common sense and good judgment. It shows how someone can win everything and still feel like they lost something. What do you think? Was Fitzpatrick right to defend his team, or did he tarnish the win? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.